By the end of that afternoon, no one on the set was speaking. Not the crew, not the fighters who had been watching closely. What had started as a casual exchange between two professionals ended with a quiet shift in authority, one that required no explanation and invited no argument. There was no injury, no raised voice. Only a brief demonstration, witnessed by a few, remembered by many, and later retold with careful restraint. Those present would say the silence arrived first. Understanding came later. The set was already active long before the cameras were ready. Lighting rigs hung in fixed positions. Cables ran along the floor, taped down carefully to avoid interruption. Crew members moved with practiced familiarity, each person focused on a narrow task. There was nothing chaotic about it, nothing improvised. It was a place designed to reduce uncertainty. Bruce Lee arrived without ceremony. He was not the center of attention when he stepped onto the floor. On a film set, hierarchy is established by schedules and call sheets, not reputations. He greeted a few people quietly, listened more than he spoke, and moved toward the area marked for rehearsal. His clothing was plain. His posture was relaxed, almost neutral, as if conserving effort rather than displaying readiness. Those who worked with him regularly noticed the same pattern each day. He warmed up without urgency. Not stretching to be seen, not isolating himself either. His movements were small and deliberate, shoulders rolling once, wrists rotating briefly, a slow shift of weight from heel to forefoot. Nothing that suggested performance, everything that suggested preparation. To most on the set, Bruce Lee was a professional doing a job, a fight coordinator, a performer. A man known for precision, not volume. The environment reinforced that impression. This was not a gym and not a ring. There were no judges, no audience, no expectation of proving anything. Martial skill existed here only to serve the camera. Timing mattered, but only in relation to marks on the floor. Power was implied, never delivered. Control was the highest value. Bruce understood this distinction well. Witnesses would later recall that he spent more time watching than demonstrating. He observed spacing, angles, how performers reacted when movements came close, but never connected. When corrections were needed, they were given quietly, often with a single adjustment rather than explanation. A shift of stance, a reminder to breathe, a small change in distance. There was no attempt to establish authority through command. Authority was assumed, not announced. Between rehearsals, he stood off to the side, arms relaxed, attention present but unfocused. It was the posture of someone waiting without anticipation, someone comfortable with pause. Those nearby sensed it but could not easily describe it. He did not project intensity, he reduced it. The set continued its rhythm, cameras were tested, a scene was reset. Laughter surfaced briefly from a corner and faded again. Nothing yet suggested confrontation. And yet, for reasons that would only become clear later, several people would remember that moment as unusually still. Not tense, not dramatic, simply balanced. It was in that controlled environment, where force was supposed to be simulated and certainty was supposed to be rehearsed, that a real question would quietly emerge, not spoken loudly. Not framed as a challenge, but present enough that it could not be ignored. And Bruce Lee, without changing his position, was already aware of it. Chuck Norris arrived later in the day, stepping onto the set with the same ease he carried into competition. He was already known to many present, not as an actor first, but as a disciplined fighter whose reputation had been earned through structure, repetition, and results. His presence did not disrupt the workflow, but it did subtly redirect attention. This was not arrogance, it was familiarity. Those who had trained seriously understood what he represented. A system refined through tournaments, rules, and measurable outcomes. Strength tested against strength, timing against timing. He carried that history quietly, without the need to reference it. He watched for a while before engaging. From a short distance, he observed Bruce Lee move through rehearsals, how he adjusted spacing without instruction, how he ended movements before others finished reacting. There was nothing theatrical in it, nothing that aligned neatly with competitive frameworks. That difference registered immediately. When they finally spoke, it was brief, polite, professional. No one recalls the exact words exchanged at first, only that the tone remained even. Two men accustomed to being listened to, speaking without urgency. Yet something shifted when their attention narrowed to one another. Not conflict, comparison. The moment that followed was small, almost dismissible. A pause, a smile. A phrase delivered lightly without emphasis. Your move. It was not said to provoke. It did not need to be. The words functioned more like an invitation than a challenge, an acknowledgement that something unspoken had reached its natural point of testing. The smile suggested confidence, not hostility. A belief shaped by years of confirmation. Around them, others noticed the change before understanding it. No one stepped back dramatically, no space was cleared, but conversations stopped. Not abruptly, just gradually, as if attention had been redirected by instinct rather than decision. This was not unusual when skilled individuals crossed paths. It was recognition, not anticipation. Bruce Lee did not respond verbally. He did not smile back, nor did he harden his expression. Witnesses would later say he looked exactly the same as he had moments earlier, balanced, unremarkable, attentive. If there was a response, it came not through posture or gesture, but through stillness. The absence of reaction carried weight. In competitive environments, acknowledgement often escalates tension. Here, the opposite occurred. The lack of urgency removed friction instead of increasing it. What remained was clarity. A question had been posed, and it would either be answered or quietly withdrawn. Bruce did not step forward immediately. He waited, not for permission, not for an audience, but for the moment to settle into inevitability. And when it did, there would be no misunderstanding about what had been shown, or why no explanation followed. The subtle tension spread slowly, almost imperceptibly. Crew members who had been arranging lights or adjusting cameras paused mid-motion. They were not instructed to watch, but instinct drew their attention. The quiet authority between the two men demanded it. No one spoke. The usual chatter of a film set, the rustle of cables, the murmur of instructions. The distant footsteps faded to near silence. Even background noise seemed to defer. Observers later described it as a natural quiet, not imposed. Their eyes turned first, then their awareness followed. There were no warnings, no gestures. The space itself seemed to recalibrate around the two figures. People shifted weight slightly, not to create distance, but to acknowledge a presence they could not articulate. The moment was unremarkable in appearance. No sudden movements, no raised fists, but it carried an unmistakable gravity. Bruce Lee remained still. His focus was precise but unobtrusive. He watched not the challenger but the environment. The floor, the distance between them, the subtle cues that only someone trained to observe would notice. Every detail mattered, though few could identify why. Chuck Norris, in turn, did not push or test aggressively. He stood with a relaxed posture, arms hanging naturally, yet his stance indicated readiness. The brief smile lingered, a mark of recognition rather than bravado. Both men existed in a space where action was possible, yet unnecessary. The silence was anticipatory without expectation. The observers' collective attention became a kind of stillness that framed the encounter. It was not curiosity that held them, but awareness that something fundamental was about to be clarified. No words passed, no instructions were given. The set's normal rhythm had slowed, bending to a rare form of order, one that required no explanation, only observation. And in that pause, everyone present understood something critical. The resolution was imminent, but it would be shown, not spoken. It began and ended in the space of a heartbeat, though to the witnesses it seemed to stretch longer. There was no shout, no preparation ritual. No one moved to clear the floor. No one called attention. What unfolded was measured, deliberate, and so contained that it was almost easy to miss. Bruce Lee shifted lightly, a movement so small that many of those present could only describe it later in fragments. A subtle adjustment of weight, a micro-step that aligned balance with intention. It was not striking, it was preparation. The challenger reacted instinctively as any trained fighter might, yet the response met precision, not force. Every motion from Bruce seemed to anticipate, rather than respond. It was efficiency without flourish, control without drama. The exchange was not loud, it was complete in timing and comprehension alone. No blow landed with intent to harm. No force exceeded necessity. Observers recall the space between them, once ordinary becoming taut, then immediately relaxed as if tension itself had been absorbed. And then it ended, not with a victory pose, not with a declaration, nothing to suggest triumph, only understanding. The silence returned, but it was heavier now, layered with recognition. Witnesses felt it first in their posture, then in their speech. The moment left a quiet imprint. Something fundamental had been shown, not claimed. Some later described it as a conversation without words. Others said it was a proof that no proof could fully capture. The method itself remained almost invisible. Its effect was unmistakable. Those watching did not question what had happened. They felt it. The lesson, if it could be called that, was not in display. It was in control, in timing and restraint. The demonstration did not exist for an audience. It existed in the intersection of skill and observation, in the clarity of knowing what to do without excess. By the time anyone breathed aloud, the brief interaction had concluded. Yet its presence lingered, unspoken, undeniable. The set's rhythm resumed, but no one moved as before. The quiet mastery had set a new standard, a silent measure that could be recognized but not duplicated without understanding its subtlety. And in that stillness, the inevitability of what had been witnessed settled. It was complete. No further action was required. The challenger did not speak, did not protest, and did not display frustration. He simply stepped back, adjusting his stance as though to signal the encounter had concluded. There was no public acknowledgement, no need to claim victory or explain failure. The recognition came quietly, in posture, in the subtle lowering of tension, in the way the eyes avoided meeting the others too directly for a brief moment. Around them, the witnesses sensed the shift before they could articulate it. Crew members resumed tasks with a tentative normalcy. Conversations restarted slowly, carefully, each word measured against the residual weight of what had just transpired. Laughter and casual chatter returned only in fragments, a reminder that the environment had been altered, even if superficially unchanged. It was not humiliation, nor was it intimidation. The collapse was psychological, a quiet acknowledgement of competence without spectacle. Those present later described it as watching confidence recalibrate in real time, a subtle reordering of hierarchy that required no declaration. Bruce Lee did not move to assert further. He remained in the same spot, posture unchanged, breathing steady. His calm did not invite challenge, it absorbed it. There was no showmanship, only equilibrium restored with precise calculation. The challenger's earlier confidence, once visible in a light smile and relaxed shoulders, had been redirected. Not erased, but reoriented. The room itself seemed to recognize the change. This was a demonstration of authority without aggression, of clarity without explanation. It was a form of dominance so controlled that many present would struggle to recount its specifics years later. The only certainty they retained was the effect, a silent acknowledgement of skill and understanding, imprinted as memory rather than spectacle. By the time the next scene was called, the psychological landscape of the set had shifted irrevocably. Conversations would never resume exactly as before, not because of fear, but because an unspoken standard had been quietly established. Decades later, the story persisted, not as a tale of confrontation, but as a quiet legend among those who had witnessed it. People spoke of it in hushed tones, careful to avoid exaggeration, yet unable to resist the weight of memory. The event did not need retelling with drama, its power lay in subtlety. Those present recalled the small details, a pause, a step, the way the space seemed to acknowledge an unspoken order. They remembered how silence arrived first, comprehension second, and only later did the meaning fully settle in their minds. It was less a story of victory than a demonstration of principle, efficiency over effort, clarity over display, mastery over assertion. For Bruce Lee, the encounter left no mark on ego or reputation. There was no need for trophies or titles. His authority was confirmed quietly, by observation and consequence rather than applause. The incident became a reference point, a model of restraint for those who sought to understand what true skill required. The challenger, too, carried its imprint. In later years, when speaking of encounters with peers, the event was described not as defeat, but as a lesson. That mastery could be silent, subtle, and absolute without spectacle. Respect was earned in moments that required no announcement, no debate, no repetition. On the set, the memory lingered in a different way. Those who returned to filmmaking or martial practice spoke of it indirectly, of a standard that demanded precision and control, of a quiet moment that quietly shifted perceptions. It became an unspoken guide, how one could demonstrate power without need for audience, influence without coercion, and authority without aggression. By the time history codified stories of fights and rivalries, this incident had already transcended such labels. It was not about who had won, but what was shown. A fleeting interaction, a measured exchange, had created a long-term reference point. It persisted quietly in the memories of those who saw it, shaping understanding and practice for years to come. The lasting impression was not noise, spectacle, or legend in the conventional sense. It was the unspoken clarity of skill, the inevitability of recognition, and the subtle confirmation that some lessons do not need to be taught. They need only to be observed. The room returned to its work that day, the cameras rolled, and life on set continued. Yet in the small triangle where two men had met, something had shifted forever. The story endured, not as a tale of aggression, but as a demonstration of restraint, authority, and the quiet, lasting power of mastery.